Hi, it's Sue Stockdale, your host for the new Sports 2000 podcast. This series takes you behind the scenes of this British sports car prototype series that gives drivers the chance to compete at some of the UK and Europe's finest circuits every year. I'll be talking to some of the people involved in making it happen, the drivers, the sponsors, and the champions, to give you an insight into why Sports 2000 is sometimes called Motorsport's best kept secret. Established in 1977, the Sports 2000 Championship ran for 15 years and then after a break began again in 1998. Since then, it's gone from strength to strength as the British National Championship for Duratecs and Pintos. And did you know that several of the competitors over the years have gone on to compete in British touring cars, Le Mans, Formula One and other international series? The Sports 2000 Championship for 2021 is sponsored by Creative Funding Solutions, and I'll be talking to Mike Lowe from that company in an upcoming episode. Support for this podcast comes from Broadtown Brewery, which I will tell you more about later. Today, I'm speaking to Nick Bates, chairman of Sports 2000, to discover what it's all about and why he enjoys racing in this championship. Welcome to the podcast, Nick.
Thank you for having me.
Now, this Sports 2000 Championship, for the listener that has never heard of it before, I wonder if you can give us a bit of a background about what Sports 2000 is.
Okay. Well, I've raced on and off in the championship or the category for the last 30 years. And when people have said to me, what do you race, Nick? It's been really hard to explain because people know saloon cars, which look like your road cars on the track. And then they know the little spindly looking single seaters where the wheels are sticking out, which we call single seaters. Category fits between the two. It's a sports car, really. So it's like a single seater underneath the bodywork. If you took the bodywork off, it's a lovely car. But the fiberglass or carbon fiber bodywork actually covers the wheels. So it's classed as a sports car. So I've said over the years, I drive a sports car. And then people get these ideas in their minds that you're driving like an MG or a Morgan or something like that. And I said, that's a discredit to our championship. They're a lot more involved than that. So with modern day media, with Facebook and WhatsApp and Instagram, it's very easy now to say, this is the car we drive. And people say, oh, wow, that's a proper racing car. And I said, well, that's what I've been trying to tell you. So you've got to see the cars. They're beautifully presented and they look very aggressive and modern. That's what Sports 2000 is, basically a one-off built car. So you can't run them on the road. It's a proper racing car, but you can't generally see the wheels on, which makes them a sports car. And we tend to sit in the middle of the car on our own, single-seater wise. So that explains roughly what they are. As I said, with modern day media and photography, it's so much easier now to impress people with how they look because of a beautiful car on the track and sat in the pit lane or in the paddock when people come to support us.
Fantastic. That gives us a really clear picture, Nick. I know you've been involved with Sports 2000 for many years. How long have you been participating in the championship?
Sadly, but not to me, not sadly, but sadly it's 30 years on and off, but I've loved every minute of it. It's a hard sport. Once you get into motorsport, it's in your blood. It's very hard to walk away. I've played squash, I've played golf, I've played tennis. They're all great fun, but then you'd have to ask a driver. There's no more of a sensation of like going on the warm-up lap, getting the tyres warm, sitting on the grid, letting the lights go to green. And then even the end of the race, you jump out the car full of enthusiasm. So basically, I've stayed with it. The other thing about Sports 2000, it's very, very good value for money. There's people out there that the lap times are no quicker than us, but they're spending hundreds of thousands where we're spending within the 10,000s, basically. So pound for value against speed and fun, we are getting really good value for money. So I've stayed with the championship and it's grown around me. And obviously with my experience, I've tended to get more involved behind the scenes now, which is great. I still love to race, but I'm happy to help out with the championship. So it's all evolved perfectly because I'm happy where I am.
And in those 30 years that you've been involved, Nick, have there been any famous drivers, people that others might recognise that have driven a Sports 2000 car during that time?
There's lots of people that go on into World Championship sports car racing, but they don't tend to get too many people going into Formula One. And sadly, most people only seem to be aware of Formula One. When you mention the 24-hour race at Le Mans every year, which is a major, major world motorsport event, lots of our drivers have progressed into that. But if I say to people, I drive a sports car, a Sports 2000 car, and it looks like a Le Mans car. People give me a strange look. So there's a lot of talent gone through the championship and have done really well in other things world level. Very little have made it onto the screens with such as F1 or Formula 2 or Formula 3 because they are single-seaters, so they tend to feed from the Formula Ford sort of range. But again, we've got some top-class quality drivers over the years. And these drivers, when they look back, still look back with fondness of how they enjoyed driving a Sports 1000 car because they're quick, proper racing cars and they're ideal if you're going to go any further in the early stage of your career just to learn from.
I think you're making it sound like the best kept secret here as a category that really gives people a lot of excitement, value for money, and can be a great point for them to launch off into other things in the future.
Correct. Yeah, it's a secret that we've always known. But the benefit over the last sort of 3 or 4 years with the promotion of the championship, the cars look very professional now, well prepared. We're getting better quality race meetings. We're getting better coverage. So the secret's out a little bit more now, which is fine, which draws other drivers, other manufacturers, other teams. So it can only grow from that. So we've got nothing to hide. We're a great bunch of guys within our championship and we welcome anybody new to it with open arms. So not a problem. Come and join us.
So if the listener is intrigued by what you're saying, Nick, and they were to show up at one of your race weekends, how many cars are they likely to see on the grid? And are there different types of cars or are all the Sports 2000 cars the same?
The first question, minimum grid size would be probably 24 cars. On average, we'd like to get 30, 32 cars on the grid, which is on most circuits, like the Brands Hatch Indy circuit, that's the circuit full. So a grid of 32 cars, 2x2 on the grid, 16 rows of cars. Looks very, very impressive. We have raced at the Silverstone Grand Prix circuit when we've had 48 cars. It's a bigger circuit, wider circuit. And there are famous photos of that going into the first corner at Silverstone on the Grand Prix circuit with 48 cars. Brilliant. And yeah, we are actively, as a championship, welcoming other people because that is the future. So if anybody got involved, we've got our own website. If you go on there, there are links to the people that run the championship and we welcome you with open arms. And there are sometimes facilities at the end of the year to go testing with the team within the championship, just get a feel for it. And we've got older cars, which are very good value for money, which you could start with. You don't spend a lot of money on a really expensive brand new car initially. So you could drive one of the older cars. If you really take to it, then you progress into a newer car and then you've not wasted your money. Now, we'd make a really big effort to get people involved because if people are buying the older cars, other people will buy the newer cars and the grid just grows then. And then to answer your question, there are lots of different manufacturers. Years ago, there was probably 10 or 12. There's probably only 3 or 4 now, but they all prepare supercar. Teams like Lola have been around for years and Tiger or Tiger, depending on how you explain it. And then there's been March and there's MCR and the Gun Car. There's many more to mention. Each are very similar in performance, so it's not as though one's a lot better than the other. It's down to you to prepare the car and get the best out of it. So there's lots of choice. But if anybody was ever interested, I would go on the website. There is a contact for people that are willing to help and meet and greet you at the circuit. Come along and we'll go on from there.
That sounds great, Nick. And when I've been along to watch the races, I know that up the front often are the Duratecs cars and there are Pinto and Pinto historic cars all on the grid. What is the difference between those different types of cars?
When Sports 1000 was first invented in 1977, the engine that Ford were producing then, because we're guided by running Ford engines, Ford have always been behind the championship. So we've all got the Ford engine. The Pinto engine was the only engine available in those days. So all the cars ran this 2-litre Pinto engine. And basically that engine ran for a long while. And then Colin Fairbairn, championship coordinator, did a lot of work with Ford and said, if we're going to move forward, can we have a new engine and a new category just in case we run out of these older engines? They're built in the 70s. They can be rebuilt, but you can struggle with parts. So it's best to move forward. So the Pintos continue to run, and then we brought in the Duratecs engine. But to make it fair with the Pintos, some of the Pinto cars are built from the late 70s to the mid-80s. They're quite old, as in design-wise. So we have a Pinto historic for the older cars, and then the newer version of the Pinto cars, which is probably from about 1984 onwards, classed as Pinto. So they're non-historic, basically. So it gives the people with an older, less aerodynamic and advanced car chance to race in the historic Pinto and have success and win awards. But the other cars are the same Pinto engine, but a newer version. So you get historic and then you get non-historic, which is called Pinto, but it's all based around the engine. The Duratecs engine was then developed brilliant success. It's a lighter engine, it's a quicker engine. The cars are now got different bodywork and more aerodynamics. So that's what we originally called this the professional class, but it's just called Duratec now. So the difference really, the Duratecs are a lot newer, a lot more advanced with aerodynamics and the new Duratec engine, which is Ford offers to us to race. So it's lighter with more power. Horsepower-wise, I think Pintos are around about 140 horsepower, where the Duratec is about 200 horsepower. So it's unfair for a Pinto to race light for light with the Duratec. So we have different ways of numbers and colours of number backing. So we know when the spectators are watching, they know the difference between a quick Duratec at the front and somebody driving really well in a Pinto in a slower car. And the other main difference, if you've got very little knowledge of the circuit or the cars, when they're racing, the Duratecs have a rear aerofoil, a rear wing on the back of the car, which is quite obvious, where the Pintos have no rear wing. So that's a good way for spectators to realise where the Duratecs stop running midfield with their wings and then suddenly a car just behind that with no rear wing. That's a Pinto going very, very well, basically.
And typically, what sort of speed would you be driving at? I know that Truxton is a high-speed circuit. You mentioned Silverstone already. What sort of speed would you be driving around one of those corners at, Nick?
We can adjust speed the cars because we can play with the gear ratios. So we set the gear ratios for each circuit. Sports 2000 are very good around the corners, are very low and very aerodynamic. So they can corner at probably 120 miles an hour because they're only sort of 50 millimetres to 70 millimetres, 2 to 3 inches off the ground. So very, very low centre of gravity, good bodywork. So round corners, very, very stable. So probably 120 round corners. And then depending on the circuit, when we change the gear ratios, a circuit like Silverstone with long, long straights. So it's actually going quicker at the end of the straight. So we can gear the cars to 145 miles an hour. They're very quick, not only down the straight, but around the corners as well. So that's why as a driver, they're such fun to drive. As I said earlier, based on the money you're spending, they're quick cars, they're proper cars, and it's just great fun driving a Sports 1000.
And what does it feel like when you're behind the wheel, racing with other cars? You know, you're dicing around those circuits. What does that feel like when you're going at that speed and you daren't lift?
Motor racing is very strange. The car's never quick enough. You always come out and complain that the car's needs to be quicker or there's problems with it. So you're just racing that next car. So you're not aware of speed. And because you tend to look in the distance more than close up, things look less fast. If you're looking right at the front of the car or sideways on, you get a more comparison of the speed. But all you're doing is looking into the distance, either the next car or the next corner. So you just really focus. When you're in a race, I've watched races. Look, I get more frightened watching them when I'm driving, to be honest with you, because you're in the zone, you're racing. So, as I said, if you look into the distance, I've done circuit training with guys, and I've always said to them, if you're worried about the speed, look further ahead. Things happen less quickly, and you've got more warning as well. You can adapt to what's coming up. It's super exciting, but you don't tend to feel the speed so much. If you had another 1 mile an hour, you'd ask for it because it's not the speed, it's trying to beat the guy in front or get by him. So that is always your aim.
So I'm really getting the sense of that competitive spirit. And in those 30 years when you've been in the championship, Nick, have there been any changes in how the cars are set up, or how has Sports 2000 changed over the years?
Well, we discussed Pinto historic and standard Pinto cars. Primarily, if you look back, the cars they're driving now are very, very similar. We've had different tyre manufacturers over the years. The tyres are slightly different, but technically the cars are very, very similar. So not a big difference. The thing I find now, when we first started racing in the 90s, the grids were smaller and the championship was struggling. The actual championship stopped for a few years. It sort of died out, and that's when the SRCC, through Colin Ferraband, recreated it. We've gone from there, so it's our championship now. So there's now more cars on the grid, and they're better prepared and more professional. And all the way through the field, there's super dices and competition. So I just think it's more fun to race in, and it looks better for the spectators, and the whole thing is more professional, presented better.
Hi, it's me again, to let you know that support for this podcast comes from Broadtown Brewery, the microbrewery in Wiltshire with big ambitions. Their diverse assortment of beers range from classic best bitters and hoppy American West Coast IPAs, through to Baltic porters and Belgian triples. Only the best quality ingredients go into their beers, and their close attention to detail ensures that you can drink beers that are full of flavour and true to style. You can have them delivered straight to your doorstep, no matter where you live. So go on over to their website, broadtownbrewery.co.uk and make your choice now. And now it's back to the podcast. You've talked about the cars and about how they're very similar, and you've talked about the tyre manufacturers and so on. So where does the differentiator come from then? Are people able to spend an inordinate amount of money, or is it about the driver's skill that makes a difference?
No, your latter conversation was spot on. Basically, the whole championship is built on minimising, if we can, obviously motorsport is expensive, but minimise it so the person with the biggest wallet or sponsor or funding isn't going to win. The engines are all the same, the tyres are the same, so we minimise the money people put in because all the cars are similar weight, dimensions, etc. You can't start manufacturing the engine or the car to be non-standard, basically. So we work to sort of a datum point. Then it's down to basically just setting the suspension correctly, learning how to drive the car on the circuits. There's no way somebody can come in with big money and suddenly have a better engine, better gearbox, better tyres. It won't happen. That's what makes the championship competitive and keeps the overall cost down. And then the other thing we're really important on, we've got our own driving standards within the championship. So the worst thing in motorsport, you spend a lot of money and have a big accident, and it suddenly costs an awful lot of money. If we can minimise the accidents, people can keep racing, and there's less damage and cost. So when we sign up to the SRCC Sports 2000 Championship at the start of the year, we sign to abide by our driving standards to minimise accidents. If you see the touring cars on the television, they have lots of big accidents, but they've got massive sponsors, and often they've got sort of the actual manufacturing teams behind them. They actually manufacture the cars. So money's almost no object sometimes. I know like the crowds love the incidents, but to us as drivers, funding our own teams, you don't want an accident. It can suddenly double the cost of a season quite easily. So minimal cost as we can, keep it all a level playing field and minimise the accidents and the costs associated with those accidents.
So it's sounding like driver skill is quite an important part of this championship, Nick. And I'm wondering what you do to prepare for the season ahead and for each race.
Things were a lot different last year and this year with the COVID restrictions, but generally I work in the construction industry, so I'm always running up and down ladders and scaffolds, and I'm very active within the day. And then obviously we have gym membership, which helps, de-stress and keep you fit, but that's obviously curtailed recently. And then also I'm a qualified race instructor, so I spend a lot of time on the circuit. So I find that tunes me in mentally. And there are days when I'll sit in a racing car and somebody will follow me, and I've driven for 8 hours, and I just find that gets me in the groove mentally and physically. With a bit of work, a bit of the gym, and then a bit of instructional work, that helps me. But the gym and the instructional work's not happening at the moment, so it's slightly different this year, but we've all got the same problems. You've got to try and stay as fit as you can physically and mentally, but it all seems strange when you jump back in the car on the first race meeting of the season, but you're soon into it.
It's the practice, the preparation, keeping fit, as you say, and the knowledge of the circuits and that experience sounds like it's pretty important. Just thinking about some of those circuits that you do race at, Nick, I understand that the championship has in the past gone internationally. Tell me about that and what might be happening into this year.
Yes, our trips abroad have always been great fun. I think the championship is very close-knit anyway, but when we go abroad, we really get on well within the paddock, so we tend to have barbecues and social events in between the races, and always longer meetings anyway. We tend to go probably Thursday. We're there Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So no, the trips abroad are brilliant. We've raced at Spa, which is one of the best Grand Prix circuits in the world. We've raced at Zandvoort in Holland, which is a super circuit, which will become a Grand Prix circuit hopefully this year. And then we've raced it in Germany and a couple of French circuits. So we've done a lot in Europe, and they've all been top quality circuits, and they are great fun. As I said, not only for us drivers to drive a different circuit, and they're often Grand Prix circuits, so they're very challenging but enjoyable, but for the mechanics, the wives, the girlfriends, and everybody involved, they're a great weekend away. Sadly, this year we were going to go to Spa in Belgium this summer, but there are restrictions with travel at the moment, getting across the channel with COVID. So we've made it as a championship decision early on to cancel that this year. But I know plans will be in place for next year. And once all these restrictions are gone, we'll be back racing on the continent. We only tend to do one meeting a year, so that's great. You don't have to do them, but if you want to have a foray abroad, it's great to have a weekend away. And I said international racing is really, really fun. It brings the championship members all together as a big team and just enjoy it.
Sounds like there's an important social aspect to this as well as the competitive element. So my final couple of questions to you, Nick. If you had a top tip for somebody watching, so a spectator like me showing up at one of your race meetings, anything in particular we should be paying attention to or noticing? You're sitting in the car, you're thinking about us watching. What do you think is useful for us to be paying attention to?
Oh, good question. Firstly, I would say come and find us in the paddock anyway. We always come and chat to us individually and look at the cars. We can explain things we do to the car. We tend to have our own hospitality unit within the paddock. So somebody approach somebody and say, I'm interested, and we'll do that. And then it's just a standard procedure for them. We tend to qualify in the morning, and that's your best lap for the grid. It's not so interesting to watch that. But once the race starts, it's just a matter of watching us all warm our tyres up on the warm-up lap, which is really important for traction off the grid, so you don't spin the wheels, and then speed into the first corner. And then it's just a matter of tiny little things, smoothness, concentration, don't make mistakes. If you tend to watch the front 2 or 3 go through the first corner, you'll see towards the rear of the field, people have different racing lines and techniques. If the guys at the front are going the quickest, it's like that for a reason. So study the front guys. You don't have to be ragged to be quick, so you can still be super smooth. But you'll find those people are using all the circuit, the super smooth, almost make it look easy, but they're not. And then their concentration levels are good, that they'll do it lap after lap and not make mistakes. So just focus on how the car sits on the circuit. Forget the noise and the speed. Analyse the driver, where he brakes, where he clips in the corner early on, where he exits the corner. You'll find the good guys are doing it lap after lap perfectly. So they'll make it look simple, but it's not. It's the mental side of motorsport. It's a matter of getting it right in your brain and concentrating and not making mistakes lap after lap.
Oh, that's great. That's going to give me something different to look for this year, Nick, when I'm watching. We're going to give a top tip to your fellow competitors listening to this podcast for the season. What would you say to them?
Same as usual. We'll be there. I've got a great team around. Not only as the chairman of the Sports2000 and getting behind the scenes, helping people out, we're there to race as well. Hopefully it'll all race fairly, no damage, have super grids with well-prepared cars, and may the best man win. The main thing is we need to enjoy our motorsport, minimise the cost by not damaging the car. So if at the end of the day that happens, we're all happy and we're all loving our sport, I think everybody's going to be happy.
Brilliant. Thank you, Nick. And just as a reminder again about the website, if people want to find out more and look at those cars, what's the website address?
So it's Sports2000. So click on there. It'll mention the whole championship, our sponsors, and we're run by an organisation called MSVR, which owns some of the circuits. They're a top quality organising championship, so they're very good with publicity and media, so they'll be on the link as well. Everything's there, the drivers, the cars, the circuits, the dates, and all news, and even cars for sales, and the opportunity to meet and greet us as well. So just go on the website, and I think there's even a box where you can tap in a little questionnaire, and we'll come back to you and welcome you with open arms.
Fantastic, Nick. It's lovely to speak to you, and I look forward to seeing you at one of the race meetings this year. Thanks for your time today.
I look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you very much.
I hope you enjoyed hearing from Nick Bates on what Sports2000 is all about and why he loves being part of the community. You can connect with Sports2000 on Facebook, Instagram or Twitter, and we shall put links in the show notes. In the next episode, I talk to Mike Lowe at Creative Funding Solutions and Jason Bailiff from Broadtown Brewery, both of whom provide sponsorship support in different ways to Sports2000. I look forward to connecting with you again soon.